Hello, everyone. I hope you're having a wonderful evening. We are really excited to get started for tonight. I know some of you have been around for some of our other sessions on Monday and yesterday, but it is hump day. It is time to get started. We are going to be diving in with some ACT reading tonight. So we have quite a few awesome goals for this session. By the end of tonight, we are hoping that you'll be able to build a passage roadmap. Now, when you think roadmap, that might sound kind of odd when it comes to reading, because you might think of a roadmap as when you're driving. Although, how many of you guys actually use a map these days when you're driving? Probably not very many. We probably use Google Maps, or Siri tells us how to get somewhere. So we know what a roadmap is, even though we may not physically use one. It's really important to use a roadmap when reading, because I'm sure that many of you guys had the same problem I've had in the past, that you start reading something and you get to the end and you're thinking, oh, whoops, I totally wasn't paying attention to that. I just read this entire page, but I have no idea what's going on. Can anyone agree with me there? I'm sure that some of you have fallen into that boat before. So building a roadmap is going to help us really stay focused on what we're doing. It's allowing us to pick up really important parts of the text as we read. We're also going to distinguish main ideas from details. Now, details might seem like they're really, really important as we're reading, but when we're thinking about it, on the ACT, are we going to be able to see the passage while we see the questions? Yes, absolutely. So if we can see the passage while we see the questions, there's no reason for us to try and memorize those details. We can come back and find them. So we're really going to be focusing on main ideas as we read, so we're going to practice that today. We're also going to talk about making broad generalizations and inferences from specific references. Okay, so what does that mean? Questions are going to ask us about specific things from the text. So we want to be prepared to infer things about that information. And that's something that may not seem super straightforward to you at first, but it's something we are absolutely going to practice. So as you guys know, the reading section is the third test of the ACT. So it's the third day of the week. It all makes sense now when it's coming together. So this test will be 35 minutes long, and you're going to have 40 questions that are over 4 different passages. Now, what that means is you're going to have just over 8 minutes to spend on each passage, and it's 10 questions. So we need to make sure we don't spend way too much time reading. We got to save time for those questions. All right, so let's see here. When we read, what do you think reading efficiently means? I think what that means is that we're going to pay attention to the important stuff and not to the other stuff. But that takes practice, right? We're going to anticipate while we're reading, and we are going to practice road mapping. All right, so there are going to be different types of passages on this test. We're going to see social studies passages, humanities, natural sciences, and literary narratives. Do any of you think that what are Yeah, so these might be somewhat new to you, but it's something that when you start doing your practice, you're going to see that, okay, maybe on some of these passage types, I'm going to be a bit better than others. So there's some great questions in the chat about skimming. So yes, skimming is one thing you guys may have done before, but we're not totally skimming. We are looking for the important stuff and reading more quickly over the rest. So we're going to analyze while we read. I like it, Rihanna. That's like a really great statement right there. All right, so even though the passages are going to be different, some are going to be harder than others, we are going to use skill sets for every passage that we come across. So these questions are all going to test the same things. We're going to figure out the author's main idea, because we're going to see questions that test on the main idea. We are going to find important details if we need them. We are going to make inferences, like we talked about a little bit earlier. Inferences are going to be really important for certain types of questions. And we're also going to pay attention to the author's voice. What do you think I mean by author's voice? Author's voice. Well, I think an author could be really favorable towards something, right? Have really positive ideas about something. Or an author could really not like an idea. Or an author could be really neutral and just tell lots of information, but really not have any opinion whatsoever. That's what I mean by the author's voice. Now, the author's methods. How does the author present us with this information? Is the author giving some kind of argument? Does the author have some tone or some attitude? I like it. Attitude's a really good way to think about this. I love it. You guys are totally on board with this. It's like I don't even need to be here. All right, so we are going to teach you how to do these 4 things. We said, the questions, they're going to be 40 questions, but that's okay. They're testing us on 4 main things, and we're going to learn how to do these today. You guys are going to get some practice under your belt with 2 different passages. Let's talk a little bit more about how we can really effectively note take. Now, we mentioned this, so reading efficiently, anticipating while we're going. We're going to take some quick notes, and there's some other things we're going to pay attention to as we go through the passage. So, the author. Well, if you were to write a paper for school, do you just, you might, but you usually don't aimlessly write about something. You have some kind of topic in mind. So we're going to think that probably the ACT passage writers also have a topic in mind, right? All right, so we're going to be asking ourselves as we go here, what did the author have in mind? What did the author try to write about? What is the subject? Then you're going to be thinking about, okay, well, what is part of that discussion? Or what is not part of that discussion? We're also going to think about the purpose, okay? The purpose is why the author is writing it. So we have a topic, and then we have why. So is the author writing to argue? Is the author writing to explain? What is the author trying to do? So we're going to ask ourselves these types of questions. I already mentioned the tone. You guys mentioned the attitude. Is this something that the author feels strongly about, or is this something that the author is just trying to inform about? Now, the main idea. We've got the main point. So we're going to ask ourselves, does the author have one sentence that describes this entire thing? If she doesn't, we're going to come up with that idea. Then we're going to be asking ourselves, what does each paragraph add to the discussion? So as we go through and read each paragraph, instead of reading that entire passage and then being like, oops, I wasn't paying attention here, what does each paragraph add to the overall passage? All right, we are going to hand it back over to Eli. I know you guys had Eli on Monday, and it was super, super awesome. So he's going to hop back on now, but I'm sure that I will see you guys around. So I'm going to hand it back over to him.
All right, everybody. You'll see my camera come back on in just a second. But until then, you should be able to hear my voice. Give me, what we do in a lot of our classes is actually we do 6s. A 6 looks kind of like a thumbs up. So if you can see me, if you can hear me, if we're good to go, go ahead and toss a 6 down there in chat. Of course, over here in chat, really. I just want to make sure we're all good to go. And I'm super thankful that Kristen was here to jump in. If you don't remember, Kristen is the person who's the tiny little ant face on the end of the slides that we'll talk about at the very, very end. So I'm glad that you got to see her at the very least. You got it. You got it. Gold Star Squad. Now, actually, the stuff that Kristen just talked about is super important. I actually want to go over it one more time real quick right before we jump in and actually try it out. Because there's 3 things that she put up here on screen, and all 3 of them she covered phenomenally well. But as far as the application to the ACT goes, I just want you to hear it again. So first up, topic. Topic is what we're tested on explicitly in the passage. And remember, ACT can pull passages from wherever they want. They can pull passages from articles that you might have read, maybe in a magazine. They can pull scholarly articles or philosophy articles. But no matter what, whatever they pick, whatever you are reading, all that matters is the stuff in that explicit passage. So if you have a passage, let's say something that you're pretty familiar with, like global warming maybe, and you're pretty familiar with global warming, you kind of have an idea of what it's about, but in the passage, the author says global warming is caused by rabbit flatulence, which causes maybe M&Ms to rain down over Canada. That's what the author's arguing. So when you get to a question set, you have to say, all right, well, the answer to global warming apparently is bunny flatulence causing sugary precipitation. That's the answer. So again, topic might not have anything to do with other reading you've already done on that topic or other knowledge you know. It's just what that passage had. Second up, purpose. Of course, authors generally are giving you some sort of a reason for reading, but the bias is generally pretty slight. You're not going to see a whole lot of super extreme authors on the ACT, and that's something to tuck away in the back of your mind. We want sort of neutral positive and neutral negative. Finally, last thing that Kristen mentioned before we jump in and try this is main idea. So main idea is, a nice way to think of this is it's what you could do if you turned to your friend after the ACT was over and you said, man, how did you do on blank passage? So how did you do on the dinosaur extinction was made up by bored museum curators passage? Your friend would go, oh, I know exactly what you're talking about. That's perfect right there, that passage. That's the goal here, to have in the back of your mind just that one main theme, that one main reason that the author wrote this. Now let's try it out. First thing you're going to see when you tackle the reading test is at the very top, something like you see here on screen, where the passage came from. Now, as we go through, I'm going to show you what an expert thinker would be processing when they're reading an ACT passage. And even if this isn't you yet, I want you to start looking at how we ask questions and how the expert would internalize things. So on the right-hand side will be sort of the stuff that you'd be thinking. All right, here's the topic, here's the background. And on the left-hand side, I'm going to put the passage. So this little blue line in between just differentiates those two sides so you know exactly what I'm talking about and where we're looking at. Let's start off. Now, right off the bat, I'm going to, of course, be reading through that left-hand side. But there's a little bit of a disconnect. The disconnect is I don't really want you to read every single word, and I also don't want you to skim or skip over stuff. Instead, what I want you to be doing is thinking, how does this sentence matter? Is it fluff? Is it useless? Is it garbage? Or does it actively reinforce some sort of concept? So let's scan through. I'll give you about 20 seconds or so to read without me talking over you. And then we'll recap together on what the theme you think comes out of this paragraph. Go for it. All right, now I'm already seeing one or two people put some comments through. Again, on test day, we are going at a pretty quick clip. I know that Kristen mentioned this very briefly when she was talking about the timing, but you have 5 to 7 paragraphs essentially to read within about probably 3 minutes. That leaves you about 5 minutes left over for 10 questions, which is about 30 seconds per question. But 5 to 7 paragraphs in 3 minutes is also only about 30 seconds of reading per paragraph. So we're going pretty fast here because that's really the speed that the ACT expects you to be at for reading through these. Now, as an expert, something like what you see on the right-hand side would probably be going through our minds. Something in the past, maybe there's some correlation to new developments or new research. And what the expert is doing in the very first paragraph is this. Where is the author going? What's the author setting up? What's the transition that we're going to see from this probably introductory paragraph to the real meat of the stuff? So for right now, first paragraph has a little bit about left brain versus right-handed, right? How left brain actually makes right-handed people. And then there's this little bit of a rhetorical question here at the end. Animals too, maybe? Like, can we do this in other animals? At this point, what do you think paragraph 2 is probably going to be all about? Now, this is actually, like it says here on screen, this is what the expert reader is doing. Where am I going next? It's not just because I want to know where it's going next. It's because I want to be prepared for it. Think about it. If you could go through and grab that this theme is, human brain, and it extrapolates to handedness, and then we have a question about animals, I want that question answered. Because nothing else here in the first part of this paragraph had any other question that needs answering. It's all explanation, like what Sabrina put down here in chat. Right? There's this background theme, perfect, but the question is really extrapolating that brain information to more animals. Now, I do want to say one thing, and that's that Sabrina put a phenomenal recap down here in chat. However, when we're doing these roadmaps, a roadmap is jotting down a couple notes that help you go back to that paragraph if you need it. And the roadmap should really be pretty similar to what we're doing here on screen. 4, 5, 6 words, that's it. So try to avoid, I know it's hard to get used to this, but don't write full sentences, don't write full themes, just write down a couple quick words. So for example, in the next paragraph, all right, we've got some information about gorillas and chimpanzees and sign language. Let me be quiet for about 20 or 30 seconds just to give you a chance to read through, and then we'll recap what you should be thinking. Go for it. All right, again, that was about 20 seconds, and realistically, when you're catching yourself up to speed on really reading through pretty quickly, you'll be at 30 seconds or maybe even 40 for a longer paragraph. I'm just trying to give you enough time to scan through to get a sense of what we're doing in each paragraph. So for this one, there's this background theory, right? The apes are doing something similar to what we are, the gorillas or the chimpanzees, but there's a disconnect. And they're laying in that disconnect for us. They can communicate with sign language, but maybe it's not actually genetics. Maybe we're just mimicking stuff. Yeah, exactly. Perna has a great one. The gorillas are copying right-handedness, but when the wild, they aren't right-handed. Interesting. Now here's something else. The captive apes are right-handed, and that's some sort of mimicry in general. And I love that Lexi put it in here before I mentioned it on screen. Mimicry is a great word. It's, the perfect word in this case. But what if you don't really use the word mimicry in your everyday life? Is that a good one for us to use then in our roadmap, the notes that we're keeping only for ourselves? This isn't a book report. This isn't a summary. No teacher is ever going to see this again. So if you wanted to, instead of writing mimicry, you might write something like copy humans. Totally fine. Because again, this is for your own notes. The idea is just making sure we very clearly jot down things we'll remember. I find a lot of students unfortunately do road mapping too complicated. They'll write down the complex words in every paragraph, thinking that's the important one. No. Often, actually, those aren't the most important ones. The most important thing is the theme or the author's point of view. So just watch out for that. If you love the word mimicry and it works for you, perfect. But otherwise, I would totally back you up on just writing down copy humans instead. Next up, following paragraph, we sort of expected because we had this question at the end. Let's see how it gets answered. Go for it. All right, let's take a look. Now, I love what a couple people have started to do. Over here in the chat, I've seen a couple great responses to what would my outline look like? How would I summarize that paragraph? That's beautiful. That's exactly what we would do if this was a real live Kaplan, ACT, online prep live class. I would be asking you for your outlines, for your roadmap for every single one of these paragraphs as we go. So I like what Anna Royce put down in here. Left brain and right brain, they're using right brain more. Now we notice right brain more, but it's not just right brain more, because we do have right brain more. Yeah, you got it. You got it. Villalobos, talking about that evolution overall. So we're noting that contrast. So the expert reader is saying, wait a sec, we had this question mark at the end. Is it just mimicry? And we're getting an answer. No, it's not just mimicry. It goes back all the way through evolution. Again, you could write down goes back forever, or goes back 500 million years, or goes back to Earth as a baby, however you want to phrase it, just so you remember that little nugget of information. No, we do seem to have some level of genetics that plays out. Hold on, at this point, we're a couple paragraphs in. I have to ask, is anybody super bored? Like you're just not keeping your eyes open? I'm just putting it out there because ACT does not design these passages that way, but it is something that people have to get through. This concept that I have to read whatever this stuff is, even if I don't care about hemispheres and right hand versus left hand, we have to stay focused throughout it because that's the whole point. We don't get any points, unfortunately, for doing the reading or even jotting down this wonderful summary in our roadmap. We only get those questions right converting to points that show off the effort that you've done putting in the time for reading. So at this point, in order to keep myself focused, I usually try and think about what the next step will be. Okay, so we said it is potentially genetics. I want some backup. I want some proof. Come on, give me some scientific evidence that says maybe this does have to do with genetics. Let's see if that's the next paragraph. Go for it. Same thing, 20 to 30 seconds to read. I'll be quiet. All right, let's take a look. I gave you the full 30 seconds that time. That's about how long, even if it felt fast, that's about how long we would probably expect you to be at for your speed by test day. About 30 seconds per medium-sized paragraph. Now let's jump in and take a look because this is an opportunity for us to kind of paraphrase, right? We're testing, we anticipated we'd look at other animals, other genetics, great. But again, above and beyond just that summary, the expert reader is saying, I want to simplify this down. What's the main takeaway in 4, 5, 6 words? Because to KLH Kid 123, right, the whole point of me teaching you is so that you can do this without me. Right? Because I won't be there on test day. I've got to make sure that I can get this into your ability, your skill sets. Perfect. I like Sabrina, super fast responds. Emily, I love it, right? Testing certain animals. And the takeaway here is really what Emily put in here, that we end up with favoring right-handedness. So some sort of quick note, some sort of quick roadmap that just says as simply as possible, fish, reptiles, birds, everybody that we see favors right-handed. Now, I could have put in here whales, I could have mentioned toads, but just some quick note to come back to later. And again, even though I did just mention a couple names of people who did phenomenal, long, detailed answers to what this paragraph was about, I love a lot of the other ones that I didn't call names out to that just said animals use right side more. Right? Simple, quick, something you'd actually jot down on test day without wasting time. Now at this point, we sort of have shown that there's this connection for brain hemisphere stuff correlating over to handedness. I'd love if maybe we could come back to the very beginning premise that the author introduced us to, which was something about how this relates back to brains. Let's see how we finish it out. Go for it. Same deal, 30 seconds, because it's a longer paragraph. I'll be quiet. All right, let's take a look. So for this one, this is our end game, right? This is the finish. Our author is giving us that final concept, right? Left brain, right-handedness seems to be everywhere. Humans seem to have a lot more than others, right? The very first paragraph actually said humans have 90% right-handedness, which is above and beyond any other species that we know of. So the expert reader is looking at this going, all right, I want to sum up the main point. Help me out, if you would, in chat. What was the main idea? Why did the author write this passage for us? What's our conclusion at the end here? Because I can see on screen, okay, there's some evidence piling up. I can see that the author's mentioning humans also use tools and maybe have some genes. This seems like a continuation of a conversation, though. Surely the author has at least some takeaway that we're supposed to move forward with. Cool, and I see a few answers coming through here that I like. A couple people mentioning that this is brain development. Brain development in humans seems more to be right-handedness. And Portia, nicely done. Bias for right hand, left brain. I love that, because even though the author mostly used the term right-handedness consistently throughout, remember the original premise is that we're talking about brains. Left hemisphere dominance is showing itself in right-handedness. So don't get sidetracked by the fact that we started talking about handedness. The background, the whole reason the author brought it up is to talk about brain dominance. Cool, cool, cool. And I like that. I like that. Sergio mentioning other factors might promote this as some complexity above and beyond just genetics. Cool. Now, what I just kind of forced you to do on purpose, to think about what the main idea is, to think about why the author cares, is actually some of the most straightforward questions that we get on the ACT. When we're doing question sets, there are 4 major types of questions you're going to get in reading. Let's cover the first 2 right now. Main idea questions and detail questions. So for a main idea question or a main point question, essentially we're trying to use as simply as possible, as generally as possible, the big main point from the author to answer that question. And not, it's kind of important, not get caught in any details. That's actually the most common trap, is you'll get a main idea question and unfortunately get caught in one of the true details from the passage, but that wasn't the whole main theme. For example, if I tell you that I'm going grocery shopping and I'm going to buy some lettuce and some broccoli and celery and carrots, and then I'm going to go home and then I'm going to make a salad, and then I'm also going to make some soup, and I give you all these details about my day, and I say, what's the main idea? What was the main theme of that whole conversation I just had with you? Some people are going to say, salad as an answer. Some might say, shopping as an answer, but the whole conversation was really about my day, about the events that I did consistently throughout that day and how they stacked up. That's the goal here with main point or main idea questions. And we're going to practice a couple of them right now, but before we do, the other thing is making sure that if I do have specific details, I know where to get them, right? And that's why we make a roadmap. We make a hopefully simple roadmap so that we can always, we can always scan back to the passage. We have it in front of us. But remember, we have about 30 seconds per question to solve any given question. I don't want to be rereading paragraphs 1, 2, and 3 to find that detail. I want to go to my roadmap, notice that it was paragraph 1, reread 2 or 3 lines of text, and get my answer. Absolutely do not want to have to go back and reread the entire thing if I can help it. And even better than that, I saw a couple people ask about this in the chat. I would love to just use my roadmap. Right? Sometimes you might be able to just use the notes you took to answer the questions without ever going back and rereading. Let's be efficient. Let's be effective. Let's do a couple. So first up, the dead giveaway here, of course, is main point. So I'll let you pull in, but watch out for either off-topic or extreme answers that are little details. I want main idea only to answer this one. And I'm seeing tons of great answers coming through here. I love it. I love it. Now, again, we had a little bit of a prediction where we kind of went through, did our roadmap, and I think Portia and Sergio and a few other people mentioned we have this general main idea that there's brain development that was mostly left hemisphere, which became mostly right-handedness. And then scanning through the answers, We've got to find the one that matches up with that prediction. Well, A might be tempting. I see a couple people voting for that. Handedness, though we talked about, is not actually the main reason we're here, nor brain chemistry. We care about hemisphere development. So watch out for the phrasing of A. B, specialization, that sounds like brain development. I like it so far. C, though, all members. And then D, account for little, if any. No, we do have a majority for answer choice B. I love this. That is our first gold star, actually, of the day. Nicely done, gold star squad. But I wanted to point out that some of these other answers are pretty tempting because they mention the same topics that we saw in the passage. They mention the same themes. Now, this is actually a great time for me to answer a question that I always get as an ACT teacher, and that's, wait a sec, Eli. Couldn't I have just read a couple of these questions first and then gone back to do the passage? That way I already know what I'm going to be asked about and I can maybe answer them as I go. Well, hold that thought for a second, because I'm going to give you two scenarios. I just want to see your honest opinion, which scenario sounds better. So, first scenario. I read through all of the 7 to 10 questions that I'm about to do, and then I try and keep 7 to 10 questions in my head while reading 5 to 8 paragraphs of text. And then while reading, I try and also answer a couple of them that I remember having read in the first place. Okay, that's option 1. Option 2, I take all of my brain power at once, read the passage, make some notes, and then I do all of the questions afterwards. That's essentially the two options, right? If you're going to try and do option 1, you're forcing yourself to keep track of a whole bunch more stuff that you don't need to. If we do one thing well and then the other thing well, we force ourselves to do well. I think that's the name of the game here, is to try and make sure we get that reading done and then immediately get the points for having done the reading well. There's unfortunately really no shortcutting, no scanning the questions first and then using them. And actually a bonus statement to that, because I see everybody kind of agrees option 2 is the best, a bonus statement I can make with confidence is that you're always going to get 1 or 2 main point questions. You're always going to get 2 or 3 detail questions. You're always going to get 2 or 3 inference questions. We know what the question set is going to look like because there are 4 main question types you always get. So scanning the questions ahead of time is almost an overt waste of your time because there's only a couple types you're going to see. Speaking of couple types, though, I just showed you main point. Let's jump in with some detail questions. Now, a detailed question generally gives us a nice hint. According to the passage, or in paragraph 2, or according to Einstein's quote, something like that that tips us off. So I'll be quiet to let you try this one first. Let me give you 15 or 20 seconds to scan through it, and then let's talk about it together. All right, that was about 20 seconds. I know I said on test day 30 seconds, but we're warming up. I'm trying to work through a lot of these questions with you first to give you a better feel for what's going on. All right, why do some scientists believe? Okay, so this is a detailed question, and we need a specific connection because they're asking us why we believe some are not truly right versus left. So we need a connection more than just a true statement. It's actually a trap. I'm sure a couple people here might be tempted by one particular answer that's true, but that doesn't answer the question at hand. You know what? Bonus question for everybody. What's the answer I'm talking about? That's true, but that doesn't actually answer the question we're being given right here. This is the sort of thing I like to point out to you so you can start to get used to where the little bit of confusion can be in answering some of these. I will say we do have a majority for the correct answer. It is absolutely answer choice H. And then I saw a bunch of people putting down here in chat the trap answer that you think people would fall for is J. Yeah, that's probably the most commonly chosen wrong answer on this one, because we saw it in the passage. It was true. They have the ability to mimic human sign language, right? That was the whole premise for why they ended up potentially being right-handed. So if you ended up choosing J, don't feel bad. You chose a true statement. But we have to learn from that. Not just a true statement is enough. We have to answer the question at hand in order to get the point. So apes in the wild have no preference. Yeah, that's the real reason that we had this disparity, because in captivity they could mimic sign language, but the left versus right-handedness was the wild apes. So we're going to do a couple more of these, but detailed questions, remember, have to come right there from the passage and also have to answer the question. Let's take a look. Next up, question number 3. This is also a detailed question, but probably we don't remember enough to answer it right now. This is specifically called a detail except question when we teach it in class. We go over the fact that detail except questions, well, I'll put it this way. Don't be afraid to circle one of these questions and move on, because these questions, detail except or inference except questions, tend to take more time than the others. We really have to go back and double check to look through the answers, look through the passage, and figure out what we saw there in the first place. Because there's a lot of things we could have had mentioned here, right? Everything was mentioned except, well, I mean, we had whales, we had reptiles in general, we had birds, we had toads. Everything was mentioned in paragraph 4. So we'd have to go back, we'd have to scan through paragraph 4 just to double check. Well, I mentioned a couple things to you. We had birds, we had whales, we had reptiles in general, humans of course, and actually toads were specifically mentioned. So the only outlier were orangutans. We had gorillas, for sure, and we had a little bit of some mention of chimpanzees. We did not have orangutans. Now, of course, this is something that might have taken a little bit more work, a little bit more time to research. I'm super impressed that we had a majority for answer choice C, though, even without me showing you the passage again. That's pretty rock star. I mean, it's the first time you've ever seen that passage, I assume. It's the first time I had ever read it was teaching this class. So this is the sort of thing that as we get closer and closer to test day, as you build this skill of efficient road mapping, you'll actually find yourself remembering a lot more from the passage without going back and rereading, because you're essentially processing the information twice, processing it once when you read it and a second time when you jot it back down. This is actually shown out with the literature, with actual scientific studies on learning. If you process it that second time to write it down, you've done one more step than everybody else who's just sitting there on test day reading and doing nothing. Now, actually, speaking of the questions that we're going to do and the fact that we've thought about it twice, we're going beyond the actual text, the next two types we have to talk about are beyond just the text. And these guys are inferences and generalizations. Here's the issue. Inferences and generalizations on the ACT are not the inferences and generalizations that you've probably used in your everyday life. For example, if I tell you that my phenomenal co-teacher, Kristen, who you got to meet at today's session, if I tell you that Kristen does not eat ice cream, what might you infer in the real world about that? What might you infer about my phenomenal co-teacher, Kristen, if I told you that? She does not eat ice cream. Now, there are a couple things, right? Maybe she's allergic. Maybe she has a lactose intolerance. Maybe she has sensitive teeth, so she doesn't like to eat cold things. Maybe she's on a diet. Maybe, Who knows? There's a lot of things that we might infer in the real world, but we actually can't infer any of those. If I told you on the ACT, Kristen does not eat ice cream, then the only thing you can infer is, if I see Kristen, she will not be eating ice cream. That's it. So a lot of people are actually very surprised by how simple the answers are to inference questions, because our brains try and go 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps beyond what you know, and that's not allowed. Notice what it says here on screen. Must be true based on the statements in the passage. So for example, I just typed up 3 statements on screen. You should be able to see all of them. I typed up 3 statements. Hit me up in chat if you think you know, combining all 3 of these, what must be true. I'll go ahead and read them too in case you can't see them on your screens. I always wear black shoes on Tuesdays. All of my black shoes are Heelys roller wheel sneakers. They are the best. And number 3, I'm currently wearing black shoes. Now, besides the fact that you're a little bit jealous that I have Heelys roller wheel sneakers, they are awesome. What do I know must be true based on those 3 statements combined? This would be like any 3 statements on any passage that you get. 3 statements that are somehow related. And I know I'm going to get a lot of responses that say, all right, it's got to be Tuesday. Let me show you, though, what the answer would be if this was the ACT. Currently wearing black shoes. OK, well, that's a given. So check. I know that for sure must be true. Let's go back from that. All of my black shoes are Heelys roller wheel sneakers. OK, I'm currently wearing black shoes, and all of them are this type of shoe. Well, then I also know I'm wearing black shoes and they're Heelys. OK. Last up, number 1. This is where a lot of people are saying Tuesday comes from. I always wear black shoes on Tuesdays. Hold the phone. I always do it on Tuesday. Could I also do it on Wednesday? Could I also have black shoes on Thursday and Friday? Maybe Saturday? Yeah, I totally could. I could wear black shoes any day that I want. It just so happens that I always wear them on Tuesday, but I could still wear them any other day I want to. So actually the inference for those 3 statements would be I'm wearing black Heelys. See how that doesn't seem that impressive? How that's kind of what we already knew from the passage? That's what I wanted to point out to you. Because often when we're making inferences on the ACT, we're not actually trying to go above and beyond into the stars. We're trying to just go right at what the text gave us in the first place. I'm going to get rid of this example for right now because I want to make sure we get the other question type, which is generalizations. Generalizations also do a very similar thing. We want to know what does the author believe and go a tiny bit further. Like I said, a tiny bit further, a tiny bit more vague, a tiny bit more general. So for example, if I told you that, again, we'll use my co-patriot Kristen again. If I told you that Kristen is one of the top 5% ACT expert teachers that work at Kaplan, then a generalization that I would agree with is that Kristen is definitely in the top half of expert teachers. Now notice how that's a little bit more general, a little bit less extreme, and really a little bit more vague. That's often the case. We take the statements in the passage and we go just a little bit broader, a little bit more vague to make another statement that also has to be true. Let's play around with a couple of these. First up, this one is clearly an inference, inferred from the passage. And we might need a little bit of information for this, but I want to see if you can remember some of it. If anybody remembers the detail that would be super helpful for us to see in the passage, you can toss it in chat. I'll allow I'll allow some helpful work on this one. And I see a couple responses coming through. I love it. Now, the detail that would be super helpful for us to go back to and find out is paragraph 1. Paragraph 1 actually gave us some information about right-handedness, about the kind of setup, about the initial premise of the experiment. However, we can also go through and eliminate a couple wrong answers that really are just not mentioned. If we have something that can be inferred, it had to have been true, and no species has ever displayed means that we had to have some reference to this in the passage. So let's start off. Left-handedness. Well, we did see a lot of reference to right-handedness consistently. We saw some theories of mostly right-handedness, but then we also saw neutral species. So we don't actually know anything about no species at all being not left-handed. Let's get rid of F. 95% preference, well, that would require us to have a number somewhere in the passage that mentioned a number less than 95%. Remember what I just said a second ago for Kristen? If she's in the top 5% of ACT teachers, then we know she's in the top half. So if I want to compare something to this 95%, I would have to have maybe a 90% or an 80% or a 70% somewhere that I can then use against G. So hold that one for a second, because maybe there is a number, like Sabrina is mentioning. There was the 500 million years ago thing, that was in paragraph 3. Paragraph 1 had all of the original information for us. Now, I'll give you the detail if we can't get it otherwise. Let's keep going. Preference for both hemispheres equally. We don't, there we go. I saw 1 or 2 responses. I think Ibrahim put it down here in chat. Yes. So we could get rid of the other ones in one fell swoop by remembering that in paragraph 1, they said humans have 90% right-handedness. And I think Miriam and Jesus and a couple others put in 90 as well here. But the concept is they said humans, yeah, Miriam's got it, had 90% right-handedness. And humans were the highest. Oh, wait a sec. If humans are the highest, and that whole introductory paragraph was comparing humans against every other species that we know, then we definitely have no known species that are at a 95% preference, because that's above and beyond even humans. Now hold up. I know a couple people are going to say, all right, well, I would have had to have the passage. I can't have answered that without the passage. And that's arguably true. It's not something we jotted down in our roadmap. It's something that we needed to think about where it would be to research that tiny little detail before we went further. And we could have crossed out H and J as well the same way. Both hemispheres was never actually mentioned, so we call that an off-topic answer. It's not that no species or all species, it's that we just don't know. Remember the code for inferences? Whenever they say infer, I want you to replace that with 3 words. Must be true. Every time you see inferred, I want you to replace it with that. Because the highest likelihood trap answer that you're going to see are answers that sound plausible, that sound like they make sense in the real world, but that were never in the passage. If you remember one nugget of information from all of the questions that I give you in today's session, remember that you're replacing inference with must be true. Because that's probably the most common reason that students I've had get these questions wrong. All right, let's keep rocking though. Next up, question number 5. When we say most likely agree, what would we like to to kind of change that to that makes it a little bit stronger maybe, so that we don't get trapped by an answer that sounds plausible or maybe or could be something the author might possibly say. This is what we do for both inference questions and for generalization questions. Replace that wishy-washy language. 3 words. Must be true. So the author of this passage would agree that which of the following must be true? Okay, so we got to keep it broad. We got to keep it vague. We have to have something that the author could easily say yes to. I love this. I'm scanning through those answers. I see an enormous push for answer choice D. Absolutely the correct answer. That is gold star worthy. Nicely done. We've done a couple of questions in a row that were pretty tough. I know that 1 or 2 people were excited to see the gold star again. You totally earned it on this one. We're looking for a vague, general answer the author would agree with. Yeah, handedness is not just one genetic factor or one learned factor or one set of using tools. Handedness is absolutely a little bit more complex. Boom, author agrees with it, done. Of course, like I said, there are some other answers that might be tempting because they sound plausible. Like specialization is something that we noticed was unique to humans, but they never actually said that specifically. They said that humans showed the best specialization. Not necessarily that it was only humans and humans with no other possible species. Now, at this point in the actual class, we've gone through, we've talked about the 4 different types of questions you're going to see. We've shown a little bit of a demo of how to really effectively try and do some road mapping. And now, if this was an actual class, we would practice to cement those skills. So does anybody want to do a whole passage right now? And a full question set? Like the whole deal? Like we would actually do for a real ACT on test day? We can do it. We've got time. So here's what I'm going to do. Same thing we talked about earlier. Any given paragraph by test day, we'd probably be reading in about 30 seconds. So I'm going to give you a couple paragraphs at a time so you can see both on screen. Or if it's a really long one, I'll just give you 1 paragraph on screen at a time. And then before we move on, I'll give you a quick overview of what the roadmap could have been and sort of what the expert thinking is so we don't get too sidetracked so you're not kind of going off and reading on your own completely. I want to be here as a coach and a mentor through this process. Here's my only request of you. Besides just reading, you don't even have to put anything in chat. I want you to jot down a note somewhere as you read, kind of like mimicking what you would do on test day. So for the first thing I'll put up here, I'll put up 2 paragraphs, and I'll give you a full 1 minute, 30 seconds per paragraph. All right. Oh, you know what we should do? We should put on our thinking caps first. All right, let's go for it. 1 minute, 2 paragraphs. All right, that's a full minute. I know it might have seemed a little bit fast because you're trying to read, you're trying to actually jot down some notes, all of this stuff at the same time. I totally get it. But let's review how an expert would tackle this. First up, we're getting some information here that arguably is kind of fun to read about. It's not about just like some background fluff passage or about something that's a little bit drier. This is sort of real world pop culture information. Awesome. Let's jump in. First up, scanning back over what you might say conversationally, we have this information about Rap Genius and about commenting on lyrics and giving this kind of voice for interpreting what's going on. And the expert reader, the last little point here on the bottom right, would probably be trying, as always, to sum up the most important points. And really, not just the most important points, but how I would go back and research if I needed to. So the very first paragraph, for example, we could just jot down a quick note that says, this paragraph is about what Rap Genius is, and we can use shorthand, like RG. But instead of even just saying what Rap Genius is, we could probably go further. We could say that this is some sort of lyric annotation site. So Rap Genius is lyric notes site, something like that. Very quick. Again, 4, 5, 6 words, just enough that I could go back to that if necessary. Now, the second part here mentions some history, a little bit of background, a little bit of where it came from. And again, because you're going to be jotting this down on your actual scratch paper, you can use more than just words. You can do a little bit more interpretation. So for example, the history blues versus jazz. Sure, you could also do blues and then an arrow to jazz, since it said that the jazz grew out of blues tradition. And that arrow to jazz reminds us blues first, then jazz. And we could even say after that, forward arrow again to a rap. Right, we can put this in our quick outline, our quick detailed summary of what that paragraph was, in as simple shorthand as possible. That's the idea of a roadmap. Give me a quick detail for paragraph 1, quick detail for paragraph 2, that enables me either to go just back to that roadmap or maybe to go back to the passage if necessary. All right, cool. First 2 paragraphs done. At this point, I'm going to give you 2 more paragraphs to take a look at, but notice what an expert would be thinking about. Keeping track of the paragraphs so far to research, but also anticipating what's coming next. We have this history set up, blues, then jazz, then rap. I want to know maybe more about current then. If I have a history, I'm expecting to see some transition maybe into current state of affairs. Let's take a look. Again, we have to put on thinking cap, 2 more paragraphs, and again, full minute to take care of it. Go for it. All right, that was a full minute. That's 30 seconds per paragraph, about test day timing, actually. That's what we're shooting for by the time you actually sit down for the real thing. Now at this point, of course, if you're reading a little bit slower, if you're reading for more details, I totally get it. That's how the vast majority of students come into my classes. Reading a little bit slower, a little bit more detailed, because you're used to having a little bit more time, frankly, to read whatever you want to. So let's jump in. RG, Rap Genius, has all of this interesting literary stuff, and the author is pretty excited about it, actually. The author says it gives equal attention to these things, it highlights literary techniques. The author's kind of a little bit positively biased already. I'm interested in that, because those questions that are generalizations, I'm probably going to get a question about author bias, and I want to remember the author's a tiny bit positive. So Sanam has a great one, where it started and how it was founded. Absolutely. Now again, expert reader is going maybe a little bit further here to try and figure out exactly what that paragraph has for details. So we have a little bit of background and some wrappers mentioned in paragraph 3, but mostly it cares about what Amber put down here in chat, the literary devices, the wordplay, some of the politics around it. So we might have a little roadmap similar to what you see right here on screen. Again, I want to be clear. Your roadmap should be similar to everything that we've been putting up on screen, but you can use different words, and you can certainly pick out slightly different parts of this to emphasize, because the goal is to help you remember where the details came from, as well as what the themes were. Now, at this point, we have a second paragraph that goes a little further. We had some people mentioned, Public Enemy, Lupe Fiasco, but the next paragraph is getting into the different stars, the different artists that got involved. So we have 2 specifically that were mentioned, Nasty Naz and Bobby Digital, member of Wu-Tang Clan, RZA. Now the concept here is we're getting a little bit more, but again, we could be specific in our roadmaps, because the same amount of time that it takes us to write down rap stars, we could have written down Nas and RZA. Get involved. See what I'm talking about? The idea is your roadmap should be where to find more information about this, but also should have just enough information that maybe we're going to get 1 or 2 questions where we can skim in, grab the point, and move on. Get that question right is the whole concept here of really doing this effective, efficient reading. Now, as far as this concept of annotation by public, I'm interested in that. I would actually love to know more about this. It is annotated by public, as a lot of you have mentioned down here in chat. So let's jump into the longest paragraph so far. I'm not going to give you a full minute, because it's only 1 paragraph. But I'm going to give you 45 seconds. It's long enough that probably on test day, even I would spend a little bit more time doing this next paragraph. Go for it. Again, making sure we stay thinking. Good luck. All right, now that was about 45 seconds. Remember, the goal here is to try and get us to have a sense of test day timing, even if you feel like it takes a little bit more time right now than it will by the time you've practiced and put in the effort and done the strategies to actually get up to speed. So for this one, massive paragraph. Lots of stuff in this paragraph that has important information, clearly, otherwise the author wouldn't have written so much. But the expert, as it's mentioning down here in the bottom right, is looking at a super long paragraph and trying to distill out the 1 or 2 overarching nuggets of information. What was the premise at the beginning, and how did they resolve it by the end of this massive paragraph? And a little heads up, a big paragraph like this usually has a bunch of examples in the middle, kind of like fluff. Like this is a sandwich of important thing, and fluff in the middle. While fluff sandwiches can be delicious, we want to keep them in the back of our mind when we're tackling these on test day to try and get the most important pieces out and kind of scan over the stuff that's not really as important to us. So Masrur put down here in chat, rap is more than just music. We have this kind of celebration of rap having lots of context, lots of clues. We could jot down the example. We could jot down, ACLU versus the fans on the Kanye song. That would be one way to roadmap this paragraph, just jotting down the examples. but I really like what a bunch of people have put down here in chat, going a little bit further. Right? The language in rap is more than music, and maybe is more than just music, more than one definition. Right? There's possible multiple definitions or possible ways that we could think about this. So those are two totally effective ways that we could roadmap this paragraph. One, just remembering the example here in case we have to go back. The other, remembering the theme, the idea of what's going on here so that we can go back to that concept with the example later. All right, now at this point, we have 2 more paragraphs to go, and they're shorter ones. So I'm going to do the same thing, 2 paragraphs, 1 full minute, and I hope that you've been jotting down some notes somewhere off to the side, because that's the whole point here, practicing these and getting a good feel for doing road mapping. All right, thinking cap on, 2 more paragraphs, full minute, go for it. All right, that was absolutely a full minute. Again, same timing we would expect by test day to try and get through this massive passage set in about that 3.5 minutes or so that we're really shooting for. Now in this case, these 2 paragraphs are giving us a lot of author bias, which I love. This tells us future questions. This sort of gives us a hint into those future answers, which is beautiful. So expert reader is saying, all right, there's some ideas here, but the author is giving us some additional opinion. So sure, this paragraph here, paragraph 6, might seem a little bit like, oh, rap's illogical, but it's really getting us thinking a little bit more. There's some more controversy, like what Mia put down here in chat. Nice, nice. So bringing people together over this concept, right? Making people have this interaction, have this conversation. I love it. That would be a great roadmap for us. The final paragraph, this hopefully is our author giving us a conclusion, taking a stand, letting us know why this was also important in the first place. So we could jot down something like, other texts have joined Rap Genius to kind of show that this is going a little bit further, that other people are interested and involved. Or we could do really what Mia put down here in chat and a couple other people mentioned. We could say bringing others together, and maybe something like art form and then a smiley face. Because our author is really giving us this positive point of view. Hey, Rap Genius was really good. It gave us this additional information. Put a little heart or a little smiley face. Remember, our goal is to get as much information really in our roadmap as possible. And if that's with some smiley faces or with like what Kayla put in here, rap equals poetry, a heart around it maybe, something like that, perfect. We're good to go. We've got the information we need. Jump in and do questions. Now, if we're done reading, let's take what we read and see how that translates into attacking a full set of questions. In this case, we've got 7 questions for this particular passage. Some passages might have more, up to 10 questions per passage. So let's jump in and do it. Again, probably have to have some thinking caps on for this practice. Let's go. Same deal. I'll be quiet now, though. I'll give you the full time for each question. Take about 25 seconds or so to think, and then pull in for us. All right, let's take a look. So for this one, I noticed that we've got a couple people answering in right off the bat, which of the following chronologically order happened? I love it because actually we sort of predicted this. We predicted that we'd see something about jazz or rap or blues because of how that really first couple paragraphs were introducing us to that history, specifically paragraph 2. We can probably get rid of one or two of these, right? In order for us to have examined blues and rap, that had to have been recent. Same thing with Rap Genius. That's a website that probably came a lot later than blues or jazz. But if we had that specific, accurate roadmap that I mentioned earlier, we would have jotted down not just the terms blues versus jazz, but what did I mention? We could have jotted down blues, forward arrow, jazz, to remind ourselves not just that those two were in paragraph 2, but the order in which they came. And then I even said one more forward arrow to rap. So I have that sequence. Oh, well, beautiful. If I have that sequence, then I know exactly it's blues, because I wrote blues, forward arrow, jazz, forward arrow, rap. Boom. We did have a slight majority for that one right off the bat. Nicely done. Now, I do want to do one more question, another hard question potentially, and it's this one. There we go. This is a good one. Now, as far as this question goes, who most directly expresses the opinion about something? I love this one because not only is it a slightly harder question than some of the others we've done today, and that's what we do in the actual Kaplan class is build, scaffold on difficulty, but additionally, it's one that when we get really good at paying attention to people's points of view, we'll be able to do these questions at the speed we need for test day. So first up, are there any answer choices that we know absolutely were not involved in multiple definitions, like that only gave us one point of view or one definition? Because anybody who only gives us one clearly isn't of the mindset that they have multiple points of view. Again, looking through the answers, we saw ACLU mentioned, and they had a specific interpretation of the text. We never saw them give any other interpretations. They can't be them. It's not their standpoint that we have multiple views and multiple interpretations. The user, B, I saw a couple people say get rid of B, was upset about the interpretation ACLU had, but only upset about the point of view compared to the song, not really about there being multiples. So it's either the author or D. Now, we maybe got a reference to Nas in the passage, but that was a user who actually was part of the site, not somebody who who is giving us opinions. So our default for this is really what everybody is answering right now, flooding the poll with answer choice C. That's the goal. Think about who gave us opinions throughout the passage, who gave us most likely an overarching theme or an overarching generalization. Obviously our author. And our author had that nice positive point of view about the poetry of rap and the overarching idea that maybe there's some literary context clues in here. I love it. Nicely done. This is a tough one. This is actually one that a lot of people get sidetracked on and think it's B, or maybe even get tempted by D. But we kind of crushed it in here. Now, at this point, again, we've done some work reading the passage. We've really focused in on making sure we make good, careful roadmaps. And if this was an actual class, we could spend a little bit more time looking at some different questions depending on who had a real preference for one type versus another, maybe spending some extra time on inference questions, because those are really tough for a lot of people to get used to. But if this was the actual Kaplan class, and we had spent the hour or so going through and doing reading, the other thing you'd be doing at this point is moving on to either a math section or English section, or maybe even one of our strategy sessions on overall timing, because gosh darn it, we have to get that timing down for reading, or maybe study habits or something like that in an actual class. So speaking of an actual class, let's take a look at what you'd be getting with that class just to make sure you're clear on exactly what's going on moving forward. Now, certainly you have to have some basics, right? You have to have practice from the actual test maker. You have to have a plan of attack so you know what to do when, and hopefully some awesome teachers. Again, just to be clear, this is what the course is that's going live this Friday. Right, this is on act.org. It's their website. You can log in. You can get the information right there. And on Friday, everything goes live. You can sign up for classes with me or with Kristen or with Boris or with any of the other teachers that maybe you've seen a couple of snippets of. And yes, I put down there in the bottom left, it does cost money, but there is that fee waiver eligibility. So I super encourage you, fill out the fee waiver. Make sure that you at least fill out the information just so that potentially you could get that free version of this class as opposed to paying for it if you don't have to. And a little bit more than that, remember, if you're studying, no matter how you study, you want to feel like you've put the time in for where you can improve the most. And if that's just doing thousands of questions, boom, we've got it. If you want full ACT practice, if you want to just do some flashcards in the couple spare minutes that you have and you pull them up on your smartphone before you go to something else during your day, totally cool. All of those options are built in throughout. And more than just that, speaking of extra minutes that you might have, I know that there aren't that many, right? You're doing homework, you're doing sports, you're doing theater, leadership, extracurriculars. If you don't have time when a live session is actually airing, you could log in at 1 a.m. on a Friday night and watch the one you missed, right? You can go through our on-demand recordings. You can watch a session that I did live and watch Kristen's recording version of it because you really like the way that Kristen explains some things. So convenient, on-demand, recorded instruction. A lot of students of mine say, you know what, I really like the way that you taught. I like the enthusiasm that you delivered it with, but I just want to see it again. Like, I just want to go back and have you explain that same process one more time because I didn't quite get it the first time. Perfect. That's the whole goal of those on-demand recorded sessions. And to make sure that you're not wasting time doing stuff that you don't actually need the most benefit in, we make sure we pinpoint exactly what you need to do moving forward. Sort of like a coach, right? If you're trying out for a sports team or if you're doing some sort of instrument or doing practice or trying out for a theater production, there's a particular area that you're weakest in. I like to call it opportunity area. It's where you can improve the most. I want to study that. I want to focus on that. If you're playing a piece for some final presentation or some final concert, I don't want you to be practicing the part of the solo that you already know. I want you to be practicing the part of the solo that you're not 100% sure on. That's the goal of this. Detailed report, feedback, so you know exactly what to do when, so you're not wasting your time. So you're doing what's most effective and efficient for the time you have available. Of course, I already mentioned the expert instructors. I hope I can stay humble by saying that you've already seen down here our phenomenal, tiny, tiny, tiny little ant head of Kristen. And of course, you've also seen her full-sized head. Or maybe she's just a robot. Who knows? But remember, it's not just me up here for these classes. It's all of the ACT experts that we've pulled together from the best teachers available in the Kaplan teacher pool. And you've been chatting with Kristen. You know she's phenomenal. You've been chatting with our other ACT experts. They are rock stars. If there's anything else that any of us can do to kind of walk you through our mentorship or our coaching or some little bit of counseling we can offer just for what's the best possible prep for you, let us know. Because again, I know we've seen a lot of questions about signing up on Friday, and that's awesome. I'm super excited to have you in the classes. I know this all goes live on Friday, and when it does go live, you'll see a screen like this. And this is a screen when you log into act.org and you pull up your account, and you're about to sign up for something. So if you haven't yet signed up, this is what you'll see. And you'll see, of course, the ACT with no writing versus the ACT with writing. Generally, we recommend you take it with writing so you get that English language score as well. But if your school doesn't require it, you don't want to, you don't have to. It is optional. And then right underneath any of those prices, you have the online prep or the live prep. And this is what confuses a couple people. Online prep is all of those resources, all of the interface, all of the information, all the practice questions, all of it put together, minus this floating head in the corner. So you just don't get the live interaction. You don't get to ask the questions with your other peers. You don't get the experts giving you immediate feedback in the live chat, but you do get everything else that comes bundled with the class. Now, the difference between that and the actual live course, I think, is totally worth it. I love having this interface to ask questions, but that is the difference between them if you're concerned about one versus the other. Now, if you've already signed up for your test date, if you already registered with the ACT, then when you click on register, you'll see this instead. Do you want to sign up for ACT Online Prep Live with Kaplan? If you see this screen, notice there's no additional fee for having signed up and then not pick the class and then come in later. You'll just fill out the fee for this, or maybe the fee waiver, right, and get it for free. And it's all right here in exactly the same place, right there in ACT.org. And if you're already signed up, like I said, for just the online portion without the live, you can always go back here and click on the upgrade. Now this, again, like it says here on screen, is half of the upgrade fee if you do it within this year. And that's because we don't want to give you an additional fee because you clicked on the wrong one, or you clicked on the online one and you didn't realize it didn't have any live component. That's why I wanted to be super clear about this today. You can click on the regular one and upgrade later, or you could just click on the live session in the first place, pay that up front so you don't have any sort of additional fee or any waivers or anything like that we have to go through. Again, you can always decide what you need, and you can ask us for some guidance or some support or some feedback on what would be best for your possible study scenario. Now, at this point, I do want to remind you of two things before we kind of finish out for tonight's session. Number one, it goes live Friday. So if you're going to act.org and you're looking for it, you're trying to find the link, and it's not showing up on your page the way I just showed you it would on this interface, it's because it's not live yet. It's Friday. I am super excited that so many people asked about it, and that means probably act.org's website is going to be real fun on Friday. This will be cool. Now, the second thing is act.org is the site. So when it says button below, I think we're just going to toss a link in chat of act.org. But again, there's no real big reason for you to go there right now. Bookmark it for later, bookmark your registration page, because on Friday when it goes live, you will be able to look at that and you will be able to sign in. Of course, the last two pieces here are just to give you a little bit more incentive. No matter what, it's been a pleasure for me to show you what our online Prep Live classes look like, to show you, for ACT, what it would be like specifically if you were in one of my reading classes today. Now, I know no matter what, even if you're not in one of my classes specifically, you're in excellent hands, and certainly good luck studying, good luck prepping, good luck on everything you're doing as far as effortful practice to do well on the ACT. And if there's anything else I can help out with, do not hesitate to let us know. Don't hesitate to reach out. And I believe I do have to sign off like so. Take care, everybody. And of course, if there's anything else we can do in the next couple minutes, we'll stick around to answer those questions.